Infamous meltdowns caught on camera. Here's the best, worst live interviews that showed celebrities absolutely losing it. Charlie Sheen, in a rather strange interview with ABC in February of 2011 that left almost everyone saying, "What did I just witness?" His career took another dip after the Hollywood star gave a string of bizarre answers defending his past indulgence with illegal substances and parties. The actor, who was interviewed by ABC's Andrea Canning, spent a good chunk of time blasting Two and a Half Men creator Chuck Lorre, and to note, at the time, Sheen had been fired from his starring role in the show after a series of bizarre incidents, including a wild night in Las Vegas and a trip to the hospital's psychiatric ward, and also a series of just erratic and often incoherent public statements. So during this interview, he could be heard calling Lorre a turd and a clown, presumably, for firing him. He also said the producers of the show ripped him off, and he famously proclaimed he was not bipolar, but instead bi-winning. That one sentence would go on to actually be one of the most iconic quotes of our time, with people to this day referencing it and using it, for memes alike. Now, the internet went wild as one of Hollywood's most, polarizing celebrities experienced a rather public meltdown. During the interview with Canning, Charlie Sheen explains that he has tiger blood, and when she asked, the last time he used, he said, "I don't use. I use a blender, I use a vacuum cleaner," but ultimately said, he can't really remember the last time he used illegal substances. Canning later inquires about Sheen's relentless partying, and Sheen actually suggests that he makes Frank Sinatra and Keith Richards look like droopy-eyed, armless children, whatever that is supposed to mean. Now, from beginning to end, Sheen seems to, celebrate his obvious meltdown, leading many to fear for his physical and psychological health. Despite, the controversy surrounding this interview, it actually remains a very fascinating and slightly disturbing glimpse into the mind of a troubled celebrity at the height of a meltdown. You would assume that this very public meltdown would have destroyed him and the show Two and a Half Men, but nope, it actually did the opposite. The next airing of the show, and I'll note it was a rerun, had the most ratings in its history and was the most watched show on television that night. So if that doesn't prove how much people have a hot mess, I don't know what will. Next up, Tom Cruise. In 2005, this American actor sat down with NBC's Matt Lauer to discuss War of the Worlds and his life in general. Now, Tom Cruise was all smiles talking about his movie, but the smile disappeared when Matt Lauer mentioned Cruise's earlier criticism of Brooke Shields for taking antidepressants. Now, the interview was tense and became a very strong pop culture moment. Now, the interview covered topics like Scientology, fame, and the merits of pharmaceutical, substances. Now, future wife Katie Holmes was all smiles, and Tom Cruise seems genuinely content, but when Lauer begins prying into his personal life and Scientology, the drama then begins. When speaking about, psychiatry, Tom takes a patronizing tone and his facial expression just changes drastically. Cruise said, he didn't agree with psychiatry and that problems could be cured through vitamins and exercise. Cruise and Lauer debated the merits of pharmaceutical substances. He criticized Lauer for advocating the use of Ritalin and said he didn't believe in psychiatry. Tom also said there is no such thing as a chemical imbalance. Cruise got very serious and kept saying Matt, Matt, Matt every time Lauer said he knew people who were helped by antidepressants. Now, Lauer pushes back and so does Tom, but only one of them appears to be, visually mad. Cruise insisted that he wanted to keep his relationship with Katie Holmes out of the spotlight. However, Lauer asked Cruise if his engagement to Holmes was a publicity stunt for War of the Worlds, which of course was met with a very frustrated Cruise saying, "You know what? There's always cynics. There always has been, there always will be. I have never worried about what other people think and what other people say." By the end, Cruise, essentially slaps Lauer on the wrist for challenging him, all the while pointing, his finger and melting down like only he can. Lauer called the interview his most awkward interview ever. Chris Brown is up. In 2011, this pop star's Good Morning America appearance began with a smile, but he ultimately left angry and actually shirtless. Now, this interview itself is brief, with Robin Roberts focusing mostly on Brown's past and public image rather than his new album. On camera, Brown stays focused and even performs performs a song, but backstage, however, allegedly he burst into like a violent rage as he reportedly threw a cooler and broke a dressing room window. Now, things went sour when Roberts began the conversation by asking about Rihanna. Although Brown, tried to divert the questions to focus on Fame, which was his new album, Roberts continued to drill him about his troubled past, which clearly did not sit well with Brown. He said to Roberts, "I've been focusing on this album. I think this album is what I want people to hear and want people to really get into." He said that while attempting to redirect the interview. He then added, "Definitely this album is what I want to talk about, and not what happened 2 years ago." This interview came actually 2 years after pleading guilty to charges, and Chris Brown was clearly not pleased that his past kept catching up with him. Brown didn't appreciate Robin Roberts, prying about his situation with Rihanna and all the hate that he got. So cue the meltdown and backstage hysterics. Now, Brown stormed backstage after the interview. He smashed a window with a chair, causing it to shatter and for the shards of glass to fall on the sidewalk of 43rd Street and Broadway. Security was reportedly called to the scene, but by the time they actually arrived, a very shirtless Brown was headed out the door. Shortly after the incident, Brown took to Twitter and wrote, "I'm so over people bringing up the past, yet we praise, Charlie Sheen and other celebs for their BS." He has since deleted that post, of course, followed with a series of tweets that, like his album, are dedicated to his fans. He posted one that said, "All my fans, this album is for you and only you. I'm so tired of everyone else. I love Team Breezy." And honestly, to this day, people talk about this interview, but as far as fans are concerned, what's done is done. Kanye West, you knew he was coming. Over the years, this musical artist has given us numerous meltdown moments to choose from, but perhaps the most bizarre one came in 2013 on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Now, Kanye West was already upset because of a previous skit, and he used the ABC platform to have a man-to-man discussion about ego, the fashion world, and his public image. It's a revealing interview that gives us insight into how Kanye sees himself, but it's also an absolute train wreck, especially when Yeezy compares himself to Jesus himself and reminds everybody once again that he's like a creative genius. The interview actually spanned over 20 minutes where he basically just talked to and about himself. Now, funny enough, it was this particular, interview that ended a feud that he had with the late night host. They actually made peace, and many people did say it was surprisingly sincere, and their discussion about the pressures of being a celebrity was eye-opening. Now, their original feud started when Kimmel debuted a sketch actually on his show in which children kind of reenacted an interview West gave to BBC Radio 1's Zane Lowe. West had then responded to the sketch by going on a Twitter rant against Kimmel and calling him to demand a public apology. When Kanye came on for this interview, Kimmel admitted that he'd only watched a little bit of the BBC, radio interview when they did that, and he said that he mostly did that sketch because he finds it funny to see kids curse. West said he poured his frustrations from years of tabloid press into his Twitter tirade against Kimmel because he did not personally, know members of the media who write bad headlines about him, but he knew Kimmel and had previously been friendly with him. West said, "This is one person I know, so I can go and let out everything that I feel about every single bogus weekly cover, every single bogus skit, every person who feels like it's okay to treat celebrities like zoo animals." Kimmel acknowledged that he has also felt like a zoo animal under media scrutiny, but wondered if West brings some of the backlash on himself. He said, "A lot of people think you are a jerk. I often in my own personal conversation say, no, I know this guy, he is not a jerk." As evidence, Kimmel actually then showed to the audience a picture of West smiling with the TV host's, father at a wedding, and recounted actually how nice the rapper was to everyone there. So, although many people watched what seemed like kind of a public meltdown on live TV, it would actually turn out that this one, created some peace and harmony between the two, which would lead to Kanye being a guest several more times over the years. Quentin Tarantino is next on my list. Now, Krishnan Guru Murthy of England's Channel 4 received a big surprise when this Django Unchained director shunned his questions about violence. It's no secret that, Tarantino has made some of the bloodiest films of the past 25 years, but in this interview, he gets heated up when asked about the real life implications. When the interviewer chuckles, Tarantino lights him up with a verbal attack. Between, his overall body language and the daggers in his eyes, it's clear that Tarantino is absolutely serious. Now, Quentin started the interview with a very cool demeanor, but the Tarantino train sure, derailed quite quickly. Now, Tarantino faced a series of questions about Django Unchained Shane's depiction of slavery and his frustration kind of spilled over in this early 2013 interview. Now, Django Unchained charts, the fortunes of a black slave turned bounty hunter in the American Deep South. Tarantino admitted that he relished making violent films, but insisted it's a movie, it's a fantasy, it's not real life. When asked how he could be sure that there was no link between, enjoying screen violence and enjoying real violence, the director refused to respond, saying, I'm not answering your question. He said, I'm not your slave, you're not my master, it's none of your business what I think about that. Not long into the interview, he became visibly agitated and defensive. Once Krishnan asked him specifically that question about the link between movie violence and real violence. And in my opinion, it is a fair question, but to Tarantino, not so much. He still refused to answer the question, stating that he didn't want to be lectured by him and that, the question was silly and boring. Now, the interview became super heated, with Tarantino telling Krishnan that he was being shoddy and dishonest in his line of questioning. Tarantino insisted that he had discussed this issue on numerous occasions, stretching all the way back to his, 1992 debut Reservoir Dogs. He said, the reason I don't want to talk about it is because I've already talked about it. I'm already on the record. I have explained this many, many times in the last 20 years. When asked again why he likes making violent movies, he simply just said because it's good cinema. The interview then ended abruptly, of course. He refused to continue, and he was looking very taken aback by the whole thing. Now, the incident sparked a lot of debate and discussion in the media, with some people defending, Tarantino's right to refuse to answer the question, but others also criticized him for being just overly defensive and aggressive. Well, you know what they say, right? You can't win them all. What do you guys think? Who do you think had the best, worst public meltdown of all time? Let me know your thoughts. I'm your host, Ashley. It's been great catching up.